Alright, so it's been about a month to the day since I bought the Red Rising trilogy, and I just completed the Morning Star, which is the last book in this entire trilogy of books. And yeah, I wanted to wait until I did the entire trilogy before I gave my official thoughts on it. And it's that this book series is probably the biggest roller coaster I've ever read in any of the like 130 something books I've read. And that's saying a lot because I have a lot of really fond memories with a couple of the series I've read before this. But in terms of a sci-fi, a very gritty and very personal driven sci-fi story, this probably takes the cake. And there's a lot of things I love about it. There's some things I don't quite love that honestly I don't think it's the story, like the story itself, but I think it's down to the writer's, I guess, ability to write certain things. I'll get into it a little later on. Just to get the general basics out of the way, if you've never heard of Red Rising, which I myself didn't, and I usually scour the internet for like, multiple book series to read, by established authors, and I had never heard of this. I've read Night Angel trilogy. This reminds me heavily, at least book one almost reminds me heavily of Night Angel trilogy's first book. It's like the setup is almost one-to-one. It's crazy. So I don't know how I haven't heard of this book series before. A friend from work recommended it to me. Before I get into all that, let me sort of set the premise of what this story is about. It's actually very simple. It's that if you imagine like the American Civil War, right? There's two sides. I forgot what they're called. Just the North and the South. This story is basically the rising of, like all these other people against basically the society or the hierarchy. That's, in a nutshell, that's basically what this book series is. So if you don't vibe with those kind of like Civil War kind of stories, you're most likely not going to like this series. I'm just going to be honest. And honestly, it doesn't really take center stage until like midway through book two and all the way through the last book. So, I would say book one is in its own like Red Rising in its own contained story. You could probably read it and then just be done with the series if this is not your kind of thing, like war and stuff like that. But I feel like you'd really be missing out on some incredible character writing and character dynamics. I would say that's Pierce Brown's greatest strength, is that he knows how to write characters and he knows character dynamics really, really well. And honestly, I didn't expect it because in this series, you have different colors and they're almost like different races, but they're a little bit more than that because in this, I guess, universe, whatever color you are usually tends to be where you stand in society. So like if you're a yellow, you're usually a doctor, I think, or something like that. If you're a blue, you're really good at like space engineering, technician, combat, stuff like that. If you're a gold, you're at the top of society. If you're a red, you're like the foundation of society that everyone else sort of like sits on. And you're basically like what monkeys are to humans. So everyone's human, but like it feels like they're different species almost. Reds, they're the weakest, the least intelligent, like the shortest, all that. Golds, they're the strongest, they're the fastest, they're the most intelligent, all that. Well, actually, that's not correct. Obsidians, I believe, are actually the strongest in terms of like just physical prowess. But I believe that the golds, they have a much higher like intellect. So that's why they, have reigned over the obsidians. And there's all sorts of other colors. Like whites, they don't really get brought up. I think they're like lawyers or something. But there's just so many other, more colors like brown, pinks, which are used for like human pleasures. You get my drift. There's just so many different colors. They all have a different role in society to keep the structure of society in this world, uniform sort of. And Darrow, our main character, he is a red, as the series in the first book is called, Red Rising. He is a red who is sick of his people and just all the other mid and low colors. That's what most of them are called, mid and low colors. He's sick of them being, trampled and stomped on by the golds, who are like the top 1% of the world, basically. And when his wife dies, it's literally not a spoiler. It's like, it happens in the first 2 chapters. It's not a spoiler at all. But when his wife dies, he basically sets out to seek vengeance on the society and to basically break that structure of like, like sort of like pyramid of the food chain. And so his goal is basically to infiltrate gold society and to break the entire structure of the entire society from within and rebuild it to where everyone's sort of free. Again, it's basically, it's the Civil War plot, but, done in outer space with advanced human society. It's not too complicated. It's just really, really well written. I run into a lot of series where I feel like the author doesn't have a grasp on the world. Like they let it get away from them. They sort of have an idea where they wanted it to go, and then it sort of turned into something bigger than what they were able to control. I feel like Pierce Brown has done a really good job of, I guess, laying the foundation of, what this world is going to turn into. As you're reading the entire first trilogy, you'll realize that there's not a lot of world building, at least in my opinion. I feel like there's not a lot of world building, especially with some of the other mid colors. And I feel like that's done on purpose because the first trilogy is all about Darrow's, sort of like personal expedition and, his triumph of trying to infiltrate gold society and build up all the other colors to make everyone free. And I feel like that's sort of like, it's just setting the stage for his second trilogy, which I'm about to get into. It's Iron Gold. I just bought this. It's actually a lot better. You can see, can you see that? Yeah, so you see that's Iron Gold. That's Red Rising. You see, it's not even comparable. Like, I can definitely tell that it was sort of like an introduction trilogy, but it is very like emotional. It's very character driven. And like I said, Pierce Brown just does it really, really well. I feel like that's the main thing he knows how to do. All these different characters you'll come to love, like Mustang, Several. Several's my favorite character in the entire series. Lorne, Fitchner, Dancer, all these characters you'll come to love. Even characters you'll hate sometimes, like be hot and cold about, like Tactus, like Titus. Characters in earlier books, they make appearances later. But to get as much depth from the side characters as we did in the Institute and just in the series as a whole, from a first-person perspective, it really shows that Pierce Brown knew what he was doing. And it shows he poured so much love and care into each character that he introduced. And that's something that I really appreciated. Even though a lot of characters died, and that's something that, I know character deaths are, they're used as a tool for a story progression, but there are certain moments where too many characters, I feel like, were just dying off too quickly in the Institute, where maybe they could have been utilized later on. So maybe that's my only gripe with like the Institute, but it goes to show, it like reinforced the idea that gold society, or the way that they set their standards, is broken. So maybe that was just the way he liked to like portray it and, show that to us as a reader. I don't know. But there's not too much else to this book other than Darrow learning in the Institute and learning from golds, about golds. And it basically sets up the entire series for the war that's about to happen in the future entries. But the second book in the trilogy is Golden Sun. And it's by far my favorite book in the series. It's not even close. Like if book one was like a 6.5, 7, it's still good, but it's nothing like, stand out. Book 2 is at least a 9 out of 10. Easily. It is the only book, one of the only books, to make me have such a visceral reaction as I did multiple times throughout the book. Such as like my stomach sinking whenever something happened, or like me being so pissed off. The ending of this book pissed me off so much. I usually work out after I read. I did 2 sets because I couldn't get it off my mind, and I was so pissed off. I told my buddy at work later on, I was like, it pissed me off to no end. And I couldn't wait to get into the third book. I had to get it delivered to me, and it was like excruciating having to wait those 2 days to get the book delivered. But the second book is a lot more space exploration, space battles. I believe like the very first chapter or 2 is a space battle with Darrow and one of his close enemies. This sort of branched off from the first book, I guess, in that time that we skipped. It's like a couple months, maybe it's a year or something like that. I don't really remember. It doesn't matter, honestly. But yeah, it it starts out like kind of slow a little bit at first, and then it's like it punches you in the gut. Pierce Brown is so good at doing that. He sort of like sets a lull period for maybe like 3-4 chapters, and then you get punched in the gut with something that you didn't expect. It comes out of nowhere. It's like whiplash. And yeah, like I said, he's just really good at writing moments that just leave you super captivated and you keep wanting to read. You can't. In the second book, there's some moments where I just couldn't put the book down. I took extra long lunches, extra long breaks, because he would reveal something at the end of like each chapter almost. Leave it on the cliffhanger that I wanted to know what was next. But I wanted to get into something that I didn't really like about this book, and I feel like it was a lot worse than book one, with it being a first person perspective, like point of view story. And it's that Daryl's internal monologue seemed very stagnant. And I don't mean this as like Daryl himself as a character was stagnant. I mean, the author didn't write him in a way where it showed us that he was slowly progressing or adapting or understanding things differently. It's like if you put him in the same situation 20 times throughout this book, at certain moments, it's not like anything big. You might not even be able to tell that it's a big difference. But like, you'll begin to notice that Daryl reacts to situations that he should have learned from the exact same way almost every single time. When you would expect there to be a different reaction if, I don't know, say, like, for instance, Daryl is betrayed a lot throughout the story. I mean, it's war, it's the story of betrayal, you can get it. But his reaction to betrayal was like a 5-year-old's reaction, where he just loses memory of being betrayed like 2 months ago. And I understand the goodness in Daryl. I understand his like self-righteousness, but I feel like it was a little too on the nose, and like his reaction to it was sort of blown out of proportion. Like, after being betrayed so many times, his reaction is almost like, it was almost word for word, like the same kind of like, oh, and my mind goes to a dark place after being betrayed for the 12th time. I'm like, that's not happening. I feel like Pierce Brown is a great writer, but I feel like his way of portraying Daryl's internal monologue was a bit stagnant. I don't think this was up to Daryl himself. I genuinely believe that it was that Pierce Brown wrote him in a way that was not conducive of a character that was actually learning from Golds and how they operate. Outside of that, that's basically my only like complaint of the entire trilogy, really. I mean, the trilogy overall, I'd rate like an 8.5 out of 10. Book 2, again, it's like at least 9. If we move on to book number 3, which is Morningstar, this just caps everything off. It's my second favorite. Red Rising being my last favorite isn't really like a... Man, I sound so much like Josh. This is crazy. Josh is the guy who recommended me this book. It's not like it's bad. It's just that it's the least good of all the other, like of all the other books I've read so far. Man, I mean, again, like with the emotion you feel, it's like you can feel the emotion coming from Pierce Brown, and I love it because you can just tell that he poured his heart into making this last book an incredible triumph of the series as a whole. And so many things happen. Characters that you thought were dead. Enemies that you thought were, enemies could become friends, and vice versa. Man, there's just so much. There's so much to unpack that I don't really want to get into, because if you make it through book 1 and 2, you need to go into book 3 basically almost knowing nothing. So I don't even want to say anything really. But I will say that it was a really satisfying conclusion to the story. And I'm just really excited to get into the next. This is a trilogy, I guess. I'm not sure why it's a trilogy, and the other part, I know that book 4, Iron Gold, I know that Iron Gold starts with a different protagonist, which, I mean, I'm all for it, right? I feel like Daryl's story is not over, but like sort of like it's, how do I say this? Not run its course either. It's come to a healthy stop point, I guess. And we can get back to it later on, kind of thing, right? I kind of want to know more about other, just other people just other people's stories more, because again, from the first person perspective, we mostly just get one person's story, and I want to know a lot more about others. I'm hoping that the Iron Gold will basically expand on like the entire sci-fi aspect of it, and get into a lot more of the nuances after the whole Red Rising and the whole war. But I guess I'll just have to wait and see as time will tell. I'm fast at reading books. Like when I get into a book series, again, I bought Red Rising, I believe, on August 24th, and what's today? So today's September 23rd. So I completed it yesterday, so that was the 22nd. So yeah, I mean, I completed 3 books in basically a month, working full time and just doing other stuff. I mean, I'll just read for hours if a book is very captivating. All 3 of those books at different moments were captivating. There were some things about this series that I didn't like. There were certain moments that I didn't like, but there was nothing that bad in this story that made me want to drop any of the books. So yeah, but I guess it's my sort of ramble sort of review of the first Red Rising trilogy. Again, I believe it has 2 out right now. I haven't really looked at. I buy it by book. I just keep buying. Oh, it says book 4, 6. So I'm by the 4th one. Book 5 and 6. Let me buy the 5th one. I just buy each book as I go, because I before have bought like 10 books in like an entire series. Got to the second one, was like, oh my god, this is dog shit, and then I couldn't finish it. I tried to force myself through a 3rd book, and then I wasted it. But that's just how I have to be. I can't read books online. I have to have the physical book with me, because I don't know, it just feels more like a reading experience. And if I buy something, I don't want to return it. So now I play it by book. But yeah, I guess there's my sort of review. It's not really a spoil-free review, I guess, but I didn't give away anything too serious. But anyways, if you have read Red Rising, the trilogy, let me know what you think about it, because I know most people have the same opinions about it pretty much, and that book 1 is a pretty good foundation. Book 2 is the best book and has one of the craziest endings of any book that people have read. And book 3 is just a nice, wrapping up the package, putting a bow on top of it. But I always love to hear anyone's opinion on it, whether it's the same as mine, whether it's very different than how I experienced it. I love to hear everyone's opinion on it. So yeah, just leave that in the comments and tell me what you thought about the series if you have. Other than that, peace out. I'll see you next time.